So welcome to another installment of Awaken Your Feminine Power. My name is Sarah, and if you're new to my world, I'm a feminine embodiment and leadership coach for awakening women all around the world that are really being called to tap more into their feminine. And I'm just going to start by reading a few more of these of why you are in attendance here today. So I really need to find out how to connect with my inner divine feminine. I have almost no feminine aspects in my natal chart for those of you who are fellow astrology folks. And I'm just big time anger pushing things forward, doing and not being. Okay, so you're in the right place. We're going to be speaking about that today. Open to receive and accept if something, open to receive and accept. And healing the wounded feminine, becoming aware of that and wanting to work through that. And that's very interesting. We're going to be talking about that today as well. How to reclaim the feminine energy, be open to receiving and live in alignment with who you truly are. And that's kind of a loaded statement because who you truly are is what the feminine essence points to. It's not what we perceive ourselves to be in this 3D physical reality. So let's just go ahead and dive in and get started. I love you guys sharing exactly why you were called to join here today. And so the way this call will flow is it'll be this event is just a little short of an hour, about an hour, just depending. We're going to dive deeper into identifying feminine and masculine energy. We're going to identify the toxic loops that you can be stuck in that really keep you in that overdoing energy and not allowing you to really connect into your feminine essence. We're going to talk about how to start to break some of those cycles. And the conversation always flows organically, so we'll just see where it goes. So the more interactive you are, it really does help you get more out of it, the more engaged you are. So if you're able to put your phone on silent just for 45 minutes to an hour, just to make sure that you can really take space and time for yourself, that would be beneficial. So let's just go ahead and get started. I'll check the chat box periodically, but sometimes it's distracting. So I'll check in. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A. And we'll also give a little bit of a diagnostic at the end to sort of identify if you're the word toxic has such a negative connotation. So if you're in the distorted feminine or masculine energy, we actually do need both. But oftentimes we are too much in our masculine energy. And that is because we are overprotecting, and we'll dive deeper into that. That'll make more sense here in a little bit. So my goal is to really help identify the challenges, bring women together, powerful women together that are on this awakening journey to really shine a light on some of these topics, and then go from there. So there is really a call in the collective to awaken more to our feminine essence. And we're going to dive deeper into that right now, because I wanted to be clear that feminine energy and masculine energy is not gender specific. So let's start there. When I talk about feminine energy, I'm talking to the essence of your beingness, your core, who you truly are. So let's just dive a little deeper into explaining feminine and masculine polarity. So the feminine essence really exists on the subtle realm. It's the realm that we can't see. We can't see it, taste it, touch it. It's our inner essence. It's our beingness. The masculine energy is externalized in the physical realm. And so because we live in a predominantly masculine driven society and culture that validates our worthiness outside of ourselves, right? So whether it's the car or how we look or how we dress, the media, our job, our successes at work, like all of the things are externalized forms of validation. And so if we're not truly rooted in our feminine essence, we will cling on to these external forms of success, external forms of validation, because that's what we've been trained to do. That's what we've been conditioned to do. And that's the easiest way for us then to stack up, to see how we stack up and compare to others. Another very masculine, externalized, very egocentric, actually, activity is to judge ourselves and compare ourselves to others. And so what we have is a collective that are waking up to the fact that we've been externally focused outside of ourselves for our worthiness, for our success, for our validation, and very and not going within to really connect with who we truly are and filling. I don't want to use the word filling because that sort of implies there's a void there. There actually is no void within, right? And so coming into wholeness and completeness and your own beingness from within, so that your validation is no longer something that you seek outside of yourself. That's where we're at in a collective right now. And that's who's drawn to these trainings are women just like myself, who, when I was really stuck in the hustle, so a little background on me, if you're new to my world, is prior to being a feminine embodiment coach and mentor, I was in real estate for 12 years, and it was very much a hustle and grind business. And I was go, 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 do, workaholic. I had total lack of self-care. I was eating meals in my car, driving from one appointment to the next, zero boundaries around my time or my energy. I was burned out. I was chasing that proverbial carrot of success outside of myself. I always needed more clients, more money, a better car. Like everything was always externally focused. And so no healthy boundaries around work or even relationships. I felt guilty taking time off for myself. And I had a lot of control issues. I had to control the people in my environment, my assistants, like everything, in order to this false sense of control, which was really fear-based, because it was really indicating a lack of trust within myself, and a lack of trust within life itself. And so I had a very firm grip on the steering wheel. My ego was in control, and my wounded masculine, my distorted masculine, was running the show and driving the train. Okay. And suppressing my emotions, attracting a revolving door of relationships, men in my life that were not supportive, that were not honoring, that were not open to intimacy and things like that, even though that was something desperately that I craved. And that was just a mirror reflection, showing me, which I didn't know at the time, showing me how closed off I was from my own heart. So I would attract in partners that would not require me to actually be vulnerable, because they had their own issues of not wanting to be vulnerable, open to receiving. And so that was going on like a revolving door. From the outside looking in, I tried to have it all together. So I was very much a perfectionist. I was counting calories. I was always going to the gym. I was always worried about how I looked. If someone gave me a negative comment or something like that, it would really cut to the core of my being, because I was so desperately hinging on that external validation. And the world was just reflecting back to me circumstances, situations, and cycles that were just continuously causing a lot of stress, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of burnout. A lot of fatigue. You can imagine being in that kind of situation, and maybe you can relate, that when you have such a firm grip on the steering wheel of life, with the needing to control every aspect, with a complete lack of trust in self and in life itself, and with other people showing up, that there's a lot of stress involved. That's really carrying the weight of the world, literally, like on your shoulder. That's so much shoulder tension, so much tightness in my upper body, so much that I was holding on to. This stress eventually led to a health breakdown. So immunity, fatigue, food allergies, leaky gut, SIBO, candida, IBS symptoms. It really shot my immune system. So I was always getting the flu, until eventually I landed in the ER with walking pneumonia, because I had not zero, but really low immunity, that my body was no longer able to even fight off normal infections and stuff. And so at that point, one of my solutions was to just sell my house and escape and move to Costa Rica and just go do yoga on the beach, and like, that's it. So I just really wanted to escape, which is a really egoic tendency, right? Is to escape, or to fight and resist what's happening, or to numb out to what's happening. So I was constantly numbing out to like Netflix or wine or things like that, or I was wanting to escape. So this is another, so escape, running, numbing out. Those are big, or fighting against the what is. So those four things are really big ego-driven tendencies that are a sign that the egoic mind is at play, and just continuously keeps you trapped in a hamster wheel. So I didn't go do that. I didn't move, largely because I had dogs and I couldn't figure out how to move them properly. And that's really what kept me grounded. And I did eventually go to Costa Rica and travel the world and things like that, but not at that point. But what I did set out to do was to dive deeper into my health journey, deeper into my wellness journey, deeper into trying to figure out, why is everything so tough? Why does everything feel like a struggle? Why am I always overwhelmed or burned out or stuck in hustle mode and things like that? And so I did what most of us try to do. And this may or may not resonate with you, because sometimes we go straight to working through the emotional body or the energetics of things. But I attacked it on the physical level. I started to heal my body naturally. I went vegan and clean eating and non-GMO, and got into energy medicine, Reiki healings and stuff like that. Eventually getting certified to do yoga, eventually getting certified to do energy healing and all that kind of stuff. And to a degree, that was working, right? So I was able to see results, because when we work on the physical level, we're easily able to see results quickest. And that's great, because it gives us this sense of like accomplishment, that there's something like we're able to take some power back, right? And so at that point, though, before I decided to do this shift and really dive deeper into the self-healing journey, I really just found myself where I really wanted a state of inner harmony, physical, a healthy relationship, to be really feeling good in my body, physical well-being. And I really craved ease and freedom on a core level. But at that point in my life, I had zero. I also ended an engagement, like everything was crumbling around me. So financials were up and down, work was crazy and a workaholic, the relationship was crumbling, my health was a mess. So all of this perfect storm, I call it, was happening, which was giving me no choice but to go inward. And oftentimes that's what happens when we have these tower moments in our life, and we have these moments where, holy shit, the world is bringing us to our knees, sometimes again, like these cycles repeating. And really what's happening is, that's not happening to us. That's a wounded feminine to see this as a victim, right? But it's not happening to us, it's happening for us, because these tower moments happen in our life because they give us no choice but to start to go inward, because we've exhausted so many other external things to try to solve the problem, try to fix it outside of ourselves, try to externally grasp onto something that's going to make us feel better, which maybe temporarily gives us some relief, but ultimately the pattern persists. Ultimately the cycle comes back. So I was able to heal my body and get to a place of feeling at least nourished and healthy, but I was still noticing very quick, to anger or irritation, very quick to still needing to be a perfectionist, still lots of control issues, and still having a revolving door of men that were not showing up in a supportive way. So I just had this mold of people popping into my life to reflect back to me my ability to be open to receive and be vulnerable, and having a block to my own heart. My own heart was so blocked off that that's all I could attract in. That's all I was open to receiving at the time. So so long story short, all of those things that I did, that I was called to do, that you may be called to do, they help. But ultimately, they're all pointing and leading us back to something that cannot be fixed externally outside of ourselves. And our ego can even grasp onto some of these tools and techniques that helped us get to where we are now, such as yoga or fitness or meditation. And we can latch onto that to the point where it's no longer beneficial. It's actually detrimental, because we're still using it as a crutch to keep us feeling good about our quote unquote about ourselves externally, and keep us from going inward to do the inner work. So I don't know if any of you have ever experienced turning your yoga practice into something that needed to be done and then had to happen in order for X, Y, or Z to occur. I used it as a form of fitness. I used it as a crutch, you know, same with eating, same with health, you know, like we can grasp onto anything. The ego can take a fitness routine and all of a sudden now you're using the fitness routine to just perpetuate the state of needing to be perfect. Or if you don't do it, you don't feel good about yourself. So now you got to do it. And what you've done is you just created another fancy prison for yourself. It may be healthier on a physical level. You know, it's better to eat healthy than it is to eat processed foods. So you may be, you know, so gradually we're peeling away the layers of untruth and we're moving into a deeper state of connection to who we truly are. But the ego can easily grab onto the externalized things and then use them for its advantage to keep you trapped. And so that can happen with things that are quote unquote good or something that's quote unquote not good. And there is no really good or bad. So there's no difference between if you're binging on wine and Netflix every single night to avoid your emotional intimacy or to bury your feelings or to escape what is or to get out of your circumstances versus you're going to the gym like a maniac every single day and you're pushing yourself to the extreme because that's what gives you that temporary high. It's the same thing, right? It's just two sides of the same coin. And so what really started to shift is recognizing things really started to take a new level when I stopped using the external things as band-aids and I stopped using them as crutches. And I started to go inward and tap truly into my feminine essence, which is that beingness, which is what going within. It's the essence of who we truly are. And recognizing that this yin yang, this polarity, the masculine and feminine polarity actually points to something much deeper. It points to the actual nature of our existence. And I don't want to pass this off to anybody as a projection, so just take it if it resonates. But part of what has been revealed to me is that we are all connected and that we are all one with each other at the core of who we are, which is this beingness, call it love, call it whatever you want, the true essence of who we are. We're all connected, but in this 3D reality, there's opposing forces, there's opposites, there's up and down, left and right, front and back, good and bad, and feminine and masculine. Alpha, omega, whatever you want. The universe is always showing us this duality, this dualistic expression. And so this energy that literally is the nature of our existence also exists within us because there is no separation between you and the nature of existence. So when you can really start to harness the energies that literally creates worlds within yourself, then you can come into this inner union with this yin yang energy, right? Feminine, masculine energy, and your external world, inner world, outer world, just another example of feminine, masculine, internal, external, yin, yang, will reflect back what you are embodying within, if that makes sense. Is that resonating? Is that making sense? So I just shared a little bit about my story and a little bit about, before we dive into the next segment, which is going to be a little bit more, before we dive into the next segment, I'd love to know, I saw some things happening in the chat box, but I wasn't able to glance at them. I'm going to look at them now. Does anybody resonate with any of this? Does any of this, is this hitting a core in you? Is this resonating at all? I'd love to know in the chat box while I review a couple of these messages that were going off. I love this one comment. I recognized how masculine I am and how lately I've been in a way sort of looking more at the women who appear to be very free and beautiful, flowing, and they have embodied some sort of sexuality within their bodies. I don't know how to explain it, but I just know the women who appear more feminine in their ways and angles are beginning to pop out a lot more. Yeah. And having recognized very masculine. Yeah. And that's because when you activate this essence within you and you fully come into ownership of your feminine power and the essence of your being and your divine nature, which is the essence, which is one with everyone. So you're no longer operating from a place of competition or comparison or your externalized validation. You're no longer letting the egoic mind drive the show. That embodiment piece, I talked about this in a recent newsletter blast and a post on Instagram. This is an embodiment piece that cannot be faked and it cannot be emulated. No one can teach you this. This is not something that can be faked or emulated from others, mimicked or taught in any way. It has to be embodied. And when you embody it, you ooze natural confidence, not the fake confidence, like when I was stuck in perfectionism and I had to look perfect. And really, I probably looked really upset because everybody was telling me to smile all the time. And all that did was piss me off more. So I'm putting on the show like I feel like I'm okay. But in actuality, I was crumbling inside. When you have this sacral confidence, I like to call it, from really embodying the essence of who you truly are and releasing and all of the constraints and restriction and dense energies that have been bottled up from within, you ooze magnetism. People, you ooze magnetism. And she explained this perfectly in this message that you can feel the flowing energy. You can feel the natural confidence. You can sense that it's an intuitive. It's a very intuitive thing that you can just sense. It doesn't matter what we physically look like the magazines want to tell us that we should. This is an embodiment piece that oozes. It's like our natural fragrance. It's like a flower that has a fragrance. It's that essence that just permeates, and other people can pick it up. It's like when you walk by and you can smell a flower, and you walk by, you smell the strawberries in the grocery store, and it's just like permeating. This magnetism is a byproduct of really tapping into our feminine essence and who we truly are, and peeling away all the layers of untruth that have taught us or showed us or conditioned us in some way to believe that we are not worthy divine beings at our core essence, which is who we truly are. And so we'll talk even about embracing your sensuality and sexuality, like she was talking about in there. Let's see. One person says, I'm big time guilty of using breath work and meditation as a perfect addiction, almost must be perfect. Yeah. So like our ego will latch onto these things, and now we need them. I mean, even on the spiritual journey, like over the course, like crystals and all these things are amazing. But if we're holding on to them, or we're using breath work or meditation or any of these as an external, what is the message that we're sending? We're sending the message that we're not already divinely perfect with who we truly are, that we now need something outside of ourselves, whether that be crystals or a breathwork class or meditation, which are all beautiful. I still go to yoga. I have a breathwork class tonight, right? So I still meditate on occasion, but it's no longer a religious thing where I have to do it, or feel like a piece of crap about myself if I'm not always meditating and journaling 24/7, right? If I'm called to meditate, if I'm called to journal, if I'm called to a breathwork class, if I'm called to go to yoga because that's what my body's feeling today, maybe it's a dance class, maybe it's weight training, maybe it's this or that, like who knows, maybe it's a rest day. What does my body want? The feminine energy is really connected to her body. You're really connected to your body, your emotions, your sensuality. You're very empathic, very intuitive, trusting that. I used to always have to go to the gym and do certain routines because I needed to build a certain muscle. I needed to maintain that muscle. I needed to look a certain way, blah, blah, blah. When my body just wants to flow, my body wants to feel good. And sometimes those classes were causing more pain with injuries than what I was actually getting out of them because I was forcing or I was overdoing. Right. So yes, I love that example about these addictions that we can take over. Let's see. Yeah, everything in moderation, but also sometimes you can dive into something and go deep onto something. It doesn't even necessarily be in moderation necessarily, unless that's what you're feeling, right? So it's about always coming back to recalibrating with what you're truly feeling. You may want to go on an intense silent retreat for 14 days. That's not really moderate, but if that's what you're called to do, then that's what you're called to do. But are you called to do it? Is it intuitively an impulse from within? This is the feminine energy speaking to us. This is the essence of your being speaking to us, speaking to you, speaking to me, speaking to us, right? So what are we called to do? Where are we forcing things in life? Whether that be in our relationships or in our work environment or with our fitness routines or health routines or self-care rituals or this or that, like where are we forcing things instead of allowing? Where's the resistance to allowing whatever is coming up, and then allowing that to be, first allowing that to be, and then taking any inspired actions from that point that you're called to take, versus letting the masculine energy, distorted masculine energy, take the wheel. And so let's talk about that for a second. I was just really having fun reading some of these comments. I'm happy to see that so many of you are resonating, and I'm really looking forward to I read all of these. It's the first thing I do when I end this class is I go read the messages, because I can't keep up with them during the training, but they're the first thing I want to read as soon as we're done. So let's talk about the masculine energy, because I know like that's really a big piece of this. And there's sometimes, a misconception that we only need to focus, the feminine energy is what we need to focus on, and the masculine energy gets a bad rap. The reason the masculine energy gets a bad rap is because we've been in this constant striving and overdoing and overgiving. The masculine energy is the protector energy. It is the strong, powerful energy. It is the energy that provides structure, and it's results driven. It's goal oriented. Remember, it's externalized. And so it's focused on, getting results outside of ourselves. It's provides stability. It's very resilient, very courageous, strong in an external sense, whereas the opposite would be feminine, being empowered from within, right? So it gives structure to our life, and it gives structure to our society, and it gives protection. But when the masculine energy when the feminine is in her distorted energy, when we're in our distorted feminine energy, which means we're in our victim energy, or we're in our lack of worthiness, when we're seeking that carrot outside of ourselves, we're seeking that external validation, we're seeking outside it, we're not connected to our inner essence and our beingness, which we'll talk about even more. What happens is the masculine energy comes in like the protector that it is, to protect. So what it does is it overprotects, or it overcompensates, or it overgives. Masculine energy is very giving. The feminine energy is very receiving. But if you have a perceived void from within that you're not filling with, that you're still trying to, if you have a perceived void from within and you're not connected to your innate worthiness and your beingness, then the masculine energy kicks into overdrive and goes out to protect that perceived void, which can look like boundaries around your heart, which is like part of my story that I shared earlier, right? Instead of just having healthy boundaries that allow people in, I had firm boundaries that was letting nobody in. I was like really pushing away. I was priding myself on being Miss Independent, and I can do everything myself. And I was unavailable to let people in because my masculine energy was distorted and going into overprotection. Or another example, if the feminine energy is if you're not connected to your inner beingness and your inner worthiness, then the masculine can go into overgiving, right? The masculine energy is very giving, but if you're coming from a place of trying to perceive that void because you need the external validation, so now you're giving at your own expense. You're giving at your own expense because there's still this feeling of unworthiness within. Otherwise, you would give for the joy of giving, and you would have a healthy boundary around what's not in alignment. So you're not over giving, you're not bleeding yourself dry, you're not giving, you're still protecting your own energy and your own space, right? And so it's really important for the masculine energy, which works in tandem with this warrior feminine archetype. I work with a lot of archetypes, but the masculine energy is the one that sets that healthy boundary and upholds it. Works in tandem with that warrior feminine archetype. So you are not a yes, the masculine energy. For example, when we were talking earlier about that woman that just oozes confidence, it's just, the magnetism is just like the fragrance that she gives off like a flower. She's just really in tune with her essence and her feminine energy. She is not bleeding her boundaries dry. She has healthy boundaries. She's not saying yes when she means no. She's not saying no when she means yes. When she walks into a room, you can sense that presence, and you can sense that natural confidence, and you can sense that energy and that ownership of who she truly is. But that's because she respects and protects her own inner masculine, is respecting and protecting and giving to her constantly in order to create that space for her feminine to blossom. So we actually need both integrated feminine and integrated masculine, because the masculine is the protector. The masculine is what holds the sacred space for the feminine to feel safe enough to be herself, to speak her truth, to say yes when she means yes, to say no when she means no. If your masculine energy is either in overcompensation mode, distorted, or not courageous enough to set the healthy boundaries and uphold them, your feminine will not feel safe to open up. This is about, and when I was seeking that safety and protection outside of myself in the form of a man, in the form of a relationship, that's not what I got back, reflecting back to me, because the relationships just reflected back to me my own inner feminine lack of worthiness, lack of connection with my feminine essence, and my own lack of integrated masculine energy. I had no boundaries around my time or my energy. I would overgive. I would people please. I would not honor my emotions when they came up, and I would just not want to ruffle feathers. So I would just go along with the flow. And eventually what happens is when we disown ourselves enough over and over again over time, and suppress our emotions and don't speak our truth and don't have that space to truly feel or be ourselves, what that does is it suppresses a lot of anger, and we get a lot of anger and resentment. I had a post on this just recently, that anger is sacred. We're taught as quote unquote females in this physical world, as a female body, men too, but females especially, that anger is a bad thing. And that expressing anger means you're crazy or, and that we're just supposed to smile and look pretty and feel and be feminine, quote unquote feminine. The anger is wrong or bad. When we abandon ourselves enough over and over again by not upholding our boundaries or that protect our values, and that we sell ourselves short. This is that prostitute archetype I talked about. It's very much like the wounded feminine, the one that's always selling herself short for some form of validation or external approval, afraid of being rejected, afraid of really truly being herself. When this is when this cycle is at play, then a lot of anger, sadness for our own lack of being able to uphold our own value system is buried. And that can come out eventually, like rage, like anger, like you can be so effing pissed off. And sometimes it just has to be released in a healthy way in order to move through that energy. But this is a result not of someone else in our external world doing something to us. They're just a reflection. They're just a mirror. This is a result of us suppressing our own needs, our own values, and becoming a chameleon to be whoever we need to be for other people to like us or validate us. And while we suppress our own authenticity and our own voice, that pisses us off eventually. And that anger and that rage, that anger and that sadness and that emotions for our own self-abandonment and our own self-betrayal eventually comes up to be purged and released. That's making sense. I don't know how I got on. See, these are such organic flowing conversations. So I'm not sure what question led to that in the chat box, but is that making sense? Is that resonating? And so part of this process is to be able to heal that quote unquote, I say wounded feminine loosely in air quotes here, because we're not really wounded at our core. We just believe that we are. And that's not to say, discount that we haven't gone through things, because we all have. And that those things can't be on a psychological level damaging and things like that, or that there could be conditioning there. But at the root, core of who we truly are, you cannot be wounded. And that is what the feminine essence points to. And everything else is a belief system or a conditioning that has happened from our environment or from our upbringing or from our situations or our circumstances. But at the root, core, we cannot be wounded. Because what we are is truly the essence of our beingness, which is life itself, love itself. That's who we truly are. And this journey is really about peeling away the layers to get to that. It starts off as an empowerment journey. What it turns into is peeling away all of the untruths that are layered upon what we believe to be, how we believe ourselves to be in this world. It's really a process of both. It's a process of recognizing that it's the core woundedness that keeps us seeking and keeps us from being present, because we're not comfortable with what is, right? We're not comfortable with certain situations. And so the seeking outside of ourselves is really just saying that we're not okay with what is. And oftentimes there's a void or a trigger there that the external validation, the thing that you're seeking outside of yourself, is soothing you. It's a form of self-soothing in a way that gives you temporary relief, but nothing that lasts long-term or for a lifetime. The only thing that's going to last long-term is really connecting with who you truly are. So, and then magically healing can occur. But if we're healing because we think we're broken, that's always going to be a never-ending cycle of healing. Healing will naturally occur as you peel away the layers of untruth about who you truly are, and you recognize that despite what's happened in our lives that have caused us to feel unsafe in some way or unworthy in some way, and have caused walls to go up, protection mechanisms to go up, recognize that this is just natural part of being a human being. This is the human condition. And we don't have to buy into those stories anymore. And it's ultimately the pain that we feel, or the fear, or whether it's a fear of abandonment or fear of loss or shame or guilt or anger or whatever it is that's underlying, that's being suppressed or repressed. When we allow those things to surface and just be released without giving them any more story, without feeding the narrative, without going into and making and digging deeper holes, we just allow it to be. And we recognize, like, oh, we can actually be uncomfortable and allow this to surface and allow it to be released. And you come into more wholeness every single time that happens, where you no longer need the external carrot to satisfy you anymore. And the paradox with this is just like the woman in the chat box that mentioned the magnetism. When you're coming from a place of void, seeking outside of yourself, the message that you're sending is that you don't already have it, and that you're at a loss, or that you're at a lack. The wounded feminine is very much operating from lack energy, from victim mindset, from loss, from needing something outside of herself. And this can be very sneaky, even in the spiritual world, the whole manifestation thing. You know, if you're trying to manifest from a place of void, what you're really sending is more messages that you don't actually have what it is that you desire. But when you can come into oneness with who you are, which is actually oneness with all that is, you're already connected to everything that you desire. And this magnetism that naturally starts to permeate your being and emanate out from you calls in like a magnet the things you actually desire. But it's when you actually let go of them and not need them anymore to validate you that activates this magnetism within you, because now you are whole and complete, whether it shows up or not. And isn't that ironic? I'm sure you've maybe had an experience where the moment you let something go, that's when it comes into your life. A paradox, because you don't need it anymore, because you're not operating from that lack, and your masculine, distorted masculine isn't going out to try to find it, to try to seek it out. Like, how can I get this? How can I get that? How can I get this? How can I have more of this? How can I have more of that? How can I have less of this? How can I have less of that? Like constantly going out, seeking, and trying to validate. Now your masculine can take aligned action because you're resting in your feminine, you know your worth, you speak your truth, you're showing up authentically. Now your masculine has strong, healthy boundaries. You say yes when you mean yes, say no when you mean no, and you will be challenged in those areas, right? And now you're aligning with your magnetism. So you're either repelling what it is you actually want and desire in your life, which is needy energy, victim energy, unworthiness energy, or trying to get something in your life as a success or accolade in order to fill that void. That's operating from the wounded feminine. You actually push it further away, and it's a very uphill battle to try to achieve any of these successes or desires that you want to attract in. It's an uphill battle, and it's fighting the resistance. It's fighting the nature of natural flow of who you are. When you come into the flow of who you are and you activate your magnetism, your natural essence that's connected already to all things, now you call things in like a magnet. That's when synchronicities will pick up, and you'll start to be at the perfect place at the perfect time, and the right thing will happen at this time, and it'll blow your mind how magical everything actually is, and how connected everything is, and how you're connected to everything. And that there's effortlessness. And when we say effortlessness, it's because it's effortless to be who you truly are. The efforting comes in when you're trying to fight against who you truly are, trying to go outside and seek it outside of yourself. That takes fucking work. That takes stress. That takes overwhelm. Leads to overwhelm. That's an uphill battle. What's easy is to be yourself, but our mind doesn't think that. Our mind thinks we have to go somewhere, do something, achieve something, have something, which again, having success, this is why I teach soul aligned success. It's not a bad thing to have things in your life. I drive a nice car, I go to a nice gym, there's lots of abundance, right? I have beautiful scenery, I eat healthy, like you can have all the abundance, but it's when you let go of the neediness behind the attachment to it, that it gets to flow effortlessly in your life. And that's where you hear this effortless manifestation, this effortless things flowing into your life. It's because the masculine energy, the distorted masculine energy in the egoic mind is no longer driving the show, no longer gripping the wheel. And what happens when this starts to happen is you start to have a huge relief come in, a lot of feeling of freedom and flow coming in, but also your fear around not having control and allowing life to happen for you instead of always thinking it's happening to you. That will trigger the ego that needs to be in control. Think about, again, how many different ways we try to control people, places, or circumstances. So when you start to peel away those layers of control, it can get scary to the ego, and the ego will then again latch onto things to try to maintain control or try to maintain some kind of validation or identity. And so it's not like a linear shot, like you do this and then you're done. It's a dance. It's a dance with life, and it's a dance with with what's showing up for you. And it's a dance with what's coming in, and it's a being able to go inward and tap into this essence that's able to release control, allow it to be, what is it showing you, and tapping more into that essence. But it's a dance. There's no getting off this train. We're here, right? There's no getting off this train. You're having this human experience. The question is, do you want to have an experience that is consistently fighting the resistance and swimming an uphill battle against the flow of who you truly are? Or do you want to surrender into your feminine essence and allow life to flow in an effortless way, which, by the way, does not mean there's no action taken. There's action, there's courageous action taken, actually. But the masculine can now come in and join your inner feminine essence, the aligned version of it versus the distorted version. The masculine energy can now come in and dance with you and protect you and hold sacred space and allow your feminine essence to blossom and that fragrance to permeate from your being, because you trust yourself so effing much and you trust life so effing much that you don't have to try to control anymore. That's where the burnout and the overwhelm and everything comes into play. That's a really hard battle that will never be won. It'll just be the rest of your life struggling, overcompensating, burning out, repeating cycles and patterns until maybe we're on our deathbed. And then we realize like, oh, it wasn't really supposed to be like, it didn't have to be this way. You know, you can allow yourself to open and receive and feel safe, but you have to have a strong and integrated masculine in order to do that. Is that making sense? I have lots of bullet points that I wanted to talk today, but we got off on a tangent, and I want to hear, as you know, some people joined late. If you do share, you'll end up on the replay and on my YouTube channel. So if you want to be anonymous, you can throw your question in the chat box. But if you want to raise your hand and chat and share or comment, we have about 8 minutes left. You can definitely hit the little reaction button and raise your hand and unmute. But I'm going to check the chat box. It's hard to be largely in my toxic masculine. It's hard to be largely in my toxic masculinity when I have a lot of anger, fear, and walls up towards men here in the 3D world. Yeah, so anger, and I would probably say sadness, possibly, is something that we talked a little bit about this, that there's a lot to look at in areas like that. And I can only speak from my own experience. The anger that I was suppressed, that when things were happening, quote unquote, to me, when I was stuck in my wounded feminine, that's how I viewed it. When you start to take your power back, sometimes that will be anger. Anger can be expressed when you start to take your power back, because you're so fed up with what other people have done to you, which can be seen and released and processed, but also the layer of anger that we hold within ourselves for not being there for our own self, because of our own abandonment and betrayal. And this is a sacred process to allow that anger to come up and to be released instead of repressed. We talked a lot about that earlier. I hope that resonated. Thank you for sharing. So let's talk about the light feminine and dark feminine for a second, because, I just wanted to touch on this. I'm feeling called to touch on this. So there's two different flavors of the feminine. And when we think of feminine, sometimes we think it's all, light and nurturing and all of that, which is true. So there's a light feminine, which is, compassionate and empathic, nurturing and receptive, playful, in the flow, warm, very, that mothering kind of energy, like very nurturing. And then there's a dark feminine, which sometimes people can think that that's like bad or something because of the word dark. But remember, there's two sides of the same coin. And in actuality, one woman alluded to this in the chat box, that she's being sort of drawn to seeing women that are expressing more of their sensuality and sexuality and things like that. There's like an alluring energy, and it's becoming more interesting. The dark feminine in us is that fiery aspect. It's that passion. It's that burning desire. It's that very connected to her sensuality and her sexuality and owns it, but not for manipulation. So being seductive or sensual or sexy can easily be a shadow of the feminine, where we use it to hook somebody or use it to manipulate or get our way somehow. Just like playing a victim role can somehow be used to try to manipulate a situation to get your way somehow, to get someone, guilt trip somebody into giving us, so that's a shadow. But when you're in your aligned, divine, dark feminine energy, there's, you're embracing that sensuality and sexuality. You're embracing your body. You're embracing, this primal aspect of being human and your wild, crazy self, and You know, it's very passionate, it's very fiery, and that fire element represents transformation. It's very transformational. And transformational means that you're embracing the cycles of death and rebirth, because if something doesn't fall away, nothing else can be reborn. And so in this process, you activate your dark feminine energy, actually, in this transformational journey that you're on. When you embrace the ebbs and flows that you see in nature, you know, you can be going for a walk and you can see a tree that's died and fallen away. And right next to it is a rebirth of like all these flowers that are springing up, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful. And when the old falls away and the old version dies, the one that was always compromising your values and over giving and people pleasing and putting yourself last and never filling your cup up first and things like that. When that starts to fall away, it's like a snake shedding its skin. If you've been awakened on this journey, if you've had your kundalini awakening and things like that, which many of you probably have, it's represented by the snake, the serpent, which sheds its skin. And so this dark feminine is very much rooted in the cycles of death and rebirth, because the old has to fall away in order for the new to be born and rebirth. If that makes sense. And so you actually integrate both of these on this journey. It's not just the nurturing and the self-nurturing and the caring and the receptive, warm, playful, compassionate, empathic energy of the light feminine, but it's also embodying more of your sensuality, your sexuality, your fiery passions, your desires, your fierceness, because you're powerful, you're very, very powerful. And being able to access that inner fierceness and being able to move through a transformational death and rebirth cycle, knowing that you're literally becoming the butterfly, you know, like this is a rebirthing process. Like that takes courage, and that takes a lot of power, and it takes a lot of fierceness and a lot of courage. And so there's that aspect of the feminine as well. And you actually will start to embody both as you move through this process, because the transformational aspect of it is unavoidable, but that's where you get to alchemize. It's very alchemical. The fire element represents alchemy, right? It changes things, right? So it's like ice. You add heat to that, what happens? It turns to water. You add heat to water, what happens? It turns to steam. The fire element is a very transformational element. You change forms. You're still the same essence, but you're changing forms, and there's a process to that. And that alchemical process is what the dark feminine is rooted in. It's that fiery transformational energy. It's that kundalini rising energy that's awakening and moving through you, that's burning away, quote unquote, burning away, that fire element, burning away all impurities. Anything that's not pure to your true nature gets burned away. Your attachments, the things outside of yourself that you're needing to hold on to in order to validate yourself, anything that's out of alignment, any place you're inauthentic, relationships, careers, any place that needs to be restructured, this energy comes through and it reeks, and it sometimes looks like a tower moment, like I was mentioning earlier. Because sometimes some stuff needs to crumble to the ground in order for something strong to be rebuilt. If you're trying to build a house on a really shabby foundation, you're building like a house of cards that eventually will fall. You have to have a strong foundation, right? Strong foundation. And so sometimes stuff has to crumble and fall away. And that can be painful to the degree that you attach to it through the process. The more you surrender and trust the process, which is part of that feminine essence, trusting yourself so completely, trusting life so completely, knowing that you're taking care, moving into that inner knowingness and that intuition and your own inner essence, and trusting this process so completely, the less suffering, or the less suffering happens when things in your life start to fall away in order for you to be rebirthed. Is that making sense? So many comments. I love it. I'm not going to have time to read them all, but I did want to, Mace, I hope I say your name right. You have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, thank you so much for today.
Hi.
I am so happy that I was guided to attend this.
Yeah.
So
I,
many things, so many things has resonated with me, and I wanted to ask you about the suppressed anger. I've like learned throughout my life to kind of like suppress any emotions that are not like positive, and it's like, just always wear a smile, no complaints, nothing is like, and I sometimes say it's like I don't know how to be angry, and because like when sometimes it happens, it's like full rage, and then it's like I regret and I feel guilty, so I even learned more how to like suppress that. And I like what you said. It's about like it's about that. It's like that anger is not about the person. It's more about how we suppress our feelings and our needs. So I wonder if you have any tips of how to ease into that process, like how to start, it's like expressing, but in a more healthy way.
Mhm. So when the anger starts to rise, what do you usually do? What is your coping mechanism to self-soothe that anger?
I usually try to find justifications for the person. And most of the time, what happens is that this behavior like from the person, it's like continues to happen over and over and over. Um, Although it's like, it's like I would explain, oh, okay, fine, I understand. I'm a very understanding person, da 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 da. And I don't want people to feel guilty around me. I don't want people to feel sad around me, or, it's like upset or whatever. So I keep like justifying, like doing these justifications and like telling a different story in my head, to the point where I somehow feel used.
Mm. And then that makes the anger even more so, even if it's on an unconscious level, you're then suppressing your needs and emotions, and your anger even builds even more, which is why it bubbles up as rage.
Yeah.
And so this justification for other people's anger, or other people's what's happening. First, it's okay to acknowledge this person did that and it sucks. Like that's not an honorable way or a loving way or a respectful way to be treating me, and I'm not okay with it. It's
Yeah.
okay to say that, like I'm not okay, and acknowledge that that's not okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the justification for poor behavior or toxic behavior or things like that is just a form of our own, like, codependency almost, because we're keeping the cycle going because we're still needing something outside of ourselves, and so we're allowing that cycle to repeat, instead of calling a spade and being like, that sucks, that's not okay, that's not how I deserve to be treated. And it's not coming from an egoic place, connecting with your heart space, taking time in silence, being present. When your mind, the one thing that you said, when my mind starts to justify, recognize that the mind is the egoic mind that's trying to make excuses. If you're using your mind as a tool to go grocery shopping or do your taxes, cool. If you're using your mind to tell a narrative, to try to tell a narrative and try to paint a story, whether that's past or future, you're out of the present moment, and you're in the egoic mind that's now just, the ego loves to justify. And so this is one of the archetypes I work with is a saboteur archetype. It's very sneaky. It loves justification and it loves defending excuses and things like that. But so one tell is when you go to your mind. When you go to your mind, that's a tell that you're moving from your heart space into the mind. The masculine is very analytical and very logical and is very in the mind. And there's nothing wrong with the masculine. But if you're coming from a wounded place, it's going to be distorted masculine energy. And so the egoic mind and like the distorted masculine energy is at play, where you're overcompensating. Now you're over excusing someone's behavior, right? Like, and so there's a lack of masculine energy really protecting your space. So that masculine energy is not being courageous. Remember, masculine energy is courageous, strong, sets healthy boundaries, honors your feminine heart. So if that's not happening, then the first tell in order to reverse the cycle would be to recognize when you go to your mind and drop back into your heart and allow yourself to feel the anger that's coming up. And it's okay to feel angry. Anger is sacred, and it's going to come up, and it'll come up as rage or anger, but or both, or even turn to maybe sadness. So find some maybe private place. You don't know how many times I would be sitting in my car, bawling my eyes out in my car for an extra 30 minutes when I would get home, because it was the only place that was quiet for me to release this energy and come into inner union with myself. Right? So find a place where you can express that and be okay with expressing it, and recognize and sit with what comes up as you're expressing it, and recognizing that you don't have to condone poor behavior. That's not what this is about. You're allowed to have healthy boundaries. Everybody deserves to be loved and respected and feel safe and supported and all the things. And so you don't have to accept that. But then recognize, what is it in you that's allowing that's causing you to accept it? Like those justifications and those excuses, like really it's about ourself, because that's just that person is showing up as a mirror for you in order to help you go deeper and realize, what is it that, why do I, dive deeper into the anger, because that's what we want to, so if we stop suppressing and repressing what it is that we fear, in this example, feeling angry or feeling abandoned or feeling unlovable or feeling unworthy, right? So there's something underlying there, and allowing yourself to feel that. And usually there's going to be a natural sadness and anger that comes up for you allowing yourself to perpetuate that cycle and allow yourself to feel that. As long as if we stop running from what's in the shadow we shine a light on the shadow has no power over us anymore. But if we keep running from the things that scare us, or the things that make us feel unworthy or sad or not good enough or unlovable, then we'll continue to seek that outside of ourselves, but we're going to be met with a mirror that only reflects us back inward. And it's only until we go inward and sit with that and start that process that you can release it and come into the place of love. So this is where, hold yourself with compassion. It's okay that you have whatever pattern or conditioning, right, that has put you in a place where you're justifying now this behavior. You're not pointing blame, but you're acknowledging that it's not conducive to alignment for you, right? And then, so I hope this is helping dive deeper into, with compassion, what's causing you to continue that cycle to begin with, and allow what comes up to come up. This is not about mentally trying to control the situation. This is about dropping into your heart.
Yeah.
Don't try to figure it out. What needs to come up as an intuitive insight or a spark of insight, or maybe you'll start to have some memories like, oh, this has sort of been a pattern for me, or this has sort of been, why do I keep doing this, or I keep disowning myself in some ways. And at the core of that, there's a feeling. At the core of that, there's an emotion, and you want to avoid that emotion. And you want to avoid that feeling. Your body, your ego does, to protect you. But it's okay. You might have been in a situation in life where you had to justify things in order for your survival, especially maybe if you were little or things like that, and you don't have control over things. But now it's okay. Now it's different. Now it's okay. Now you can be your own protector. You can activate your own inner masculine and allow yourself to have that space to allow whatever comes up to come up, and hold space with compassion. And it's okay to set the boundaries in place too. It's all part of the process, right? And this will start to reverse the script on the distorted feminine and then the distorted masculine, right? Yeah. It'll start to bring you back into your heart space. Love and compassion is the gateway to that, in order to allow yourself to feel any shame or guilt or anger or rage or anything that comes up as a byproduct of being suppressing in the self-abandonment and betrayal that has allowed us to perpetuate cycles over and over again. And that breaks the cycle. but it's all about beingness. It's all about presence. It's all about awareness. So the feminine in us is very present. She's very present. And so the first tell is, again, when you go to your mind, bring it back to heart center and find some quiet space where you can be with yourself, where you're not worried about what comes up, and you just allow yourself to sit in your presence, in your beingness. And if you have a thought come up, you don't have to suppress it or push it away. It's not about rejecting anything. A thought can come up, a memory can come up, a feeling can come up, an emotion can come up. Your beingness is none of those things. Those things are like clouds passing across the sky. The core of your being is still there, almost becoming not almost, but like witnessing it and allowing it, allowing the tears to flow, which are actually very cleansing. If there's tears that flow, maybe you may not be, you can't force it, but you're okay with whatever's showing up, and you're no longer running from it. Stop.
I like
Yeah.
that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing and being vulnerable and sharing a little bit of your story, and being a great example. Someone else may have had a very similar kind of question, and or maybe someone on the replay will, and it will be great for them to hear it too. Yay, perfect.